everyone, and I hope you're doing well. Today we have a deck list of the deck that got me my Worlds invite. This topped the OTS that I just played. We got top 3, and I'm really happy about it. This deck is one I have refined over the past couple of months. It is a Kashtira Heatsoul list, and I've added a bit of spice in there to make it my own. So without further ado, let's crack into the list and show you what I've been cooking. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments, is there anything you would change about this deck? I'm always looking for cards that might work and ways to experiment with the list. So to start off the list, we're going to run through the hand traps that I run. Now, I will say there are a couple in here you might want to change, but we run crossout, so there's a couple of one-offs that I run that you might want to change. But personally, I feel like we've got an optimal ratio here. Of course, we're starting off with 3D Shifter. This is such a broken card. I won't be surprised if this gets banned soon. Whilst Nibiru has counterplay, this doesn't. And some games or matches are just decided by drawing D-Shifter in your opening hand. So you have to run 3 if you can. And that doesn't even just apply to Kashtira. That just applies to any deck in the format at the moment. Just a broken card, especially against the newly released Lightsworn that a lot of people are trying. Literally just ends their turn. So yeah, hard not to run 3D Shifter, and if you don't run 3D Shifter, do. We also run 3 Ash Blossom, which also probably isn't surprising. It plays under Shifter, and it's just generically good. Unfortunately, we used to be able to go into Barone, but that's no longer an option anymore, but it does give us an extra slot in the extra deck, so silver lining, I suppose. Next up, we have 3 Infinite Impermanence. Again, it's just a crazy card, but this card genuinely shuts you down. Like, it ends your turn. If they get your Unicorn with Imperm, it's very hard to find hands that can play through it. You need exactly Theosis. So cross out on Imperm is great, and I mean, Imperm in general is amazing as well. We have the previously mentioned, we run 3 Crossout Designator. Now, not only can this kind of negate a hand trap that gets in the way, you can also banish like one of your Kashtira monsters with it and special summon it off birth. Bear in mind you can't use the effect, but when you're in a very dire situation and this is all you have, you can use it as sort of a pseudo extender, which is a funny thing you can do in Kashtira. Now for our one of crossout designated targets, we have Nibiru. This is the important one. Heatsoul Kash dies immensely to Nibiru. It plays into it really poorly. So when you see a crossout designator, you know that you can play it into Nibiru without having to worry. We also run 1 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. I didn't see this come up today. I didn't need it, but it is a relatively good effect against you, so I put it in just for that exact reason. This is one you might be able to change for something else. And lastly, we have 1 single effect Veiler. Similar reason to Imperm, this can end your entire turn. So the reason that's in there is literally just for crossout. Yeah, every now and then it will come in handy, but oftentimes you want Shifter up, so you won't be able to use these 2, which is why I might consider changing these, but these 2 really hurt our decks, so we put them in there. That's it for the hand traps. Let's go into the engine. So Kashtira has relatively a lot of engine. Most of your deck is Kashtira cards, but with good reason, because these cards are absolutely insane. To start the Kashtira core off, we have 3 Nightmare Unicorn. This is your 1 card starter. You search either Birth or Theosis with this. You usually want Birth because it's just an insane card. And yeah, if you see this, you're happy. This is your 1 card starter, and not much more to say on that. You kind of have to run 3. Next up is Fenrir, which we also run 3 of. It's a crazy good card. I mean, if you've seen Fenrir in any other deck list, you know how good it is on its own, let alone in its own archetype. The fact that you can special summon it off numerous things like Shangri-La and Kashtira Birth and Theosis, it's really easy to get into Fenrir in this deck, and it's a really insane card. Next, we run 2 Kashtira Rise Heart. Now, I know some people run 3, but we needed room for the crossout package, and oftentimes we're searching this, and we don't often want to see it in our opening hand unless we open like exactly Birth. So I'm happy to run 2, but you can definitely run 3 if you feel like it, but I just feel like there's not enough room. This is a 41 card deck, so finding the slots was quite hard to keep it a reasonable number. And 2 more one-offs. We run a Scareclaw Kashtira and a Kashtira Ogre. Scareclaw Kashtira is a must-have. This is one of your ways to go into an OTK under 5 summons, so you need to keep this in. Ogre is, I really like it. It's a really powerful card, looking at the top cards of your opponent's deck and choosing what they will draw, and even just knowing what they're going to draw next is one of the most powerful effects I think you can have in the game, because it gives you so much info. Generally sometimes prefer this over Unicorn, and it just has a lot of attack as well, plus it's a different attribute, so it works well with the field spell because it gives you an extra 100, and it's just another name. If you have already a couple of these out, you have the Ogre left in the deck ready to go. That's it for the Kashtira monsters. Let's go over the spells. We have 3 of the field spell. Pressured Planet Race Off. Again, crazy card. This archetype is nuts. Essentially, this lets you search. You're usually going for your Unicorn, but depending on what you have in hand, you might go for like a Fenrir or a Rice Heart. But again, this is kind of technically a 1-card starter, because you can grab your 1-card starter. But if it gets ashed, it's a bit of a pain. Its second effect of being able to pop a card whenever Shangri-La is activated is really powerful. Just bear that in mind though, don't forget that this is an effect, because if you have Shangri-La and a Fenrir, if they have 1 card on field that you want to banish, you really have to consider whether you want to wait for them to play another card so that you can banish one and pop one, or if you think that banish is worthwhile to get done before they can get anything else on the field. So be careful with this card, just always consider the pop, and always remember after Shangri-La to get this activated, because I have forgotten this numerous times. I will say it's easy to forget when you're just banishing stuff and passing back. Next we have 3 Kashtira Birth. This card is insane. Like, there's no other way to say it. 3 level 7 normal summons from hand and special summons from grave or banish is nuts. If your opponent clears your board but leaves a birth, you can pretty much just build your board again. And this also allows you to go into your Heatsoul line. So you usually grab Unicorn, get Birth from Unicorn, and then normal summon a Fenrir, and then you can go into your Heatsoul line. It's the most common way of getting into it. But yeah, Birth is just insane. Crazy card. Can't not run 3. And lastly, as part of the engine, we have 2 Kashtira Theosis. Now, again, similar reasoning to Rise Heart as to why this is at 2. Mainly because we needed the room, and we can afford to cut a Theosis. In longer games, you might miss the 3rd one. But honestly, in the whole OTS today, I didn't think I needed the 3rd one at all. I think it's kind of unnecessary, and in games 2 and 3, you have Triple Tactic Thrust as well to search into it. So, yeah, I think you can definitely run 2 of this, because with your Heatsoul line, even if you do lose both of these, you can still go into your Heatsoul. So, yeah, I think you can definitely get away with running 2, and honestly, I recommend it. I may have lied when I said that was the last of the engine. I almost forgot this little card, Kashtira Preparations. This is here just to search off the Ogre, but it genuinely is a really good card. It's similar to Birth in the sense that it lets you special summon monsters, but they have to be banished first. But the kind of upside to this over Birth is that you can special summon any Kashtira monster, so if you have a banished Shangri-La, you can grab that with Preparation, and you can also activate this during your opponent's turn versus Birth, where you can't do that. So it can help kind of recover from a board clear. Just today, someone Raigeki'd my Shang and Fenrir, which wasn't my best end board, but Shang protected itself. I had Preparation. Preparation grabbed the Fenrir back. There was a D-shifter active. And then all of a sudden my board was unaffected and he was -1. So stuff like that really helps prep. And the other effect of when your opponent activates a trap or you control Kashtira monsters, you can look at their hand and banish one face down. I think that's really, really cheesy. I think the only matchup that's relevant is either Trap Tricks or Labyrinth, because the only trap most decks will be activating is evenly matched. So just be aware that that is there, because it can be really nice, and this has to be face up before activating that effect. So oftentimes I will just flip this in standby as a threat, but if you think they're going to clear your board, then maybe hold it. It's a tricky one, but it's a really, really good card. I couldn't see this deck without it. You may wonder why we're not running Kashtira Big Bang. Without a Rise Heart in the format, it doesn't feel worth it to detach a Shang material and special summon it, it's just an extra like Kashtira monster, and with the lines we can do, we can get plenty of Kashtira monsters. Plus it plays really heavily into Nibiru, and I know we have the cross out to protect from the Nibiru, but even so, you don't need it. It feels win more almost, whereas this is a recovery. So that's why we don't run Big Bang. It's yeah, as I say, it feels win more. Now we'll go over the kind of generic spells and traps. We have 3 Prosp. I mean, there's not much to say with this really. I'll show off the targets for Prosp when we get into the extra deck, so I'll put those aside when we get there. But now we have our one-of kind of spells. We have 1 triple tactics talent. It looks weird to run 1, but the main reasoning is because we have thrusts in the side, and we also have 3 crossouts. So if your opponent uses triple tactics talent, you can cross out. It kind of gives some utility in setting cross out, because it's very rare that you're going to cross out an Ash on your opponent's turn kind of thing. So it does help. I mean, talents is an insane card, so if you can negate that, that's going to help you a lot. Similar reasoning, we have 1 Called by the Grave. Now, this conflicts with Shifter, but again, it helps with cross out a lot. And if you don't see Shifter, but you see this is going to be really helpful in protecting you, specifically against Droll. Droll hurts. Unfortunately, it doesn't protect against Nibiru. That's what the cross out is for, but it is mainly for cross out, but it can come in handy. And lastly, for the spells, we have 1 Terraforming. This is just to get into your Pressure Planet Raisoth. It's just a 4th copy. It's really hard not to play it. And again, you can search that off Thrust to get into your field spell, so it turns Thrust into a starter. Now for our last generic card. It's a really spicy one, and I saw it in another list, and I do agree with it. I think it's worth running. Has won me a couple of games even today. This guy, Rivalry of Warlords. So if you don't know it, and I'm sure you do, but if I explain it again, it might show why it's used in the deck. So each player can only control 1 type of monsters. Send all other face-up monsters you control to the graveyard. So most of your Kashtiras are psychics. Right Heart is a warrior, so be careful of that. And all your kind of Heatsoul stuff, that is like Cyburst, so be careful of that. But if you're ending on kind of Shang, Fenrir, Unicorn, and you have a rivalry against most decks, that's game. Because if they can find a way to out rivalry, they still got to deal with your entire board. And yeah, I mean, oftentimes you can wait with this as well. You can wait for some sort of removal to come through. They'll usually go for your Fenrir or your Shang, try and banish those, and this will come in clutch. The reason this is in the main, not the side, is because it's so powerful. It's such a blowout card that it's hard not to run in the main. If you see it game 1, it's almost an instant win against 90% of decks. And even in games 2 and 3, I'll keep it in going first and second because it's such a blowout. And honestly, I would not run this. This is our 41st card, and there's a reason for that. I could not cut it. So that's it for the main deck. Let me go into the extra deck where we have a lot of our fun plays. So first I'm going to show off the kind of Heatsoul package. So the first thing you'll need is a Phantom Beast Dragosack. Now this gets you 2 tokens. Might as well play out the combo and explain it as we go. So we get a detach 1 from Dragosack to get 2 tokens. You just use 2 level 7, so 2 Kashtiras pretty much. And then you use both of these tokens to go into 2 Link Spiders. Now the reason we do this is because Link Spider, you can summon it using a normal monster, which these tokens are. And these are Earth Link monsters. Why is this useful, you ask? Well, that would be when you link into G Golem Crystal Heart. This essentially reads that you can revive a Earth Link monster in your graveyard and special summon it to a zone it points to. So you just grab another Link Spider, so that's the reason Crystal Heart is in here. And then you can link those off into a Decode Talker Heatsoul. Now, the reason Heatsoul is good is because it draws you 2 cards, essentially. So on your turn, you pay 1,000 and draw a card. And then in your opponent's standby phase, you can also draw another card. Now, usually you'll have some follow-up. Usually have like a Scareclaw Kashtira still in hand, or like a birth here that you can special summon another guy. With that, you can either go into using the Draco Sack and whatever's left on field, an IP Masquerena, or an SP Little Knight. So SP Little Knight is generically good. Obviously, it's an insane card, and it's quite broad. You can use it against pretty much everything. IP Masquerena, we only have one target for it, but it does turn the Heatsoul into something useful. So if we were to go into IP on their turn, we'd use both of these, or possibly more, and go into Apo. It can't be destroyed by card effects because of Mask, but it essentially turns Heatsoul from just a 2300 link monster into an actual impactful negate. And the idea with Heatsoul is to draw into as many different hand traps as possible, so that on your opponent's turn you have lots of points of interaction, and you'll usually end up with Heatsoul, IP, or SP plus a Fenrir. That's like the ideal end board, but you can go further. You just need to see cracked hands. So that's the reason the Heatsoul package is in. I do see people questioning it. One thing to note is you cannot do this under D-Shifter because your Link Spiders get banished. So if you D-Shifter, get rid of it. And earlier we mentioned about prosperity targets. I pretty much always banished these 6. If you're going into Prosp, you probably don't need the Heatsoul draws. So I usually just get rid of all these right here. Because then on their own, in your deck, they're not great. They combo well with each other. But if you don't need the Heatsoul line, you just banish all 6 and go into your usual Kashtira plays of like a Shangri-La plus something else, or just getting all your good monsters out. So that's what I usually banish off Prosp. And yeah, individually, as I say, these cards aren't great on their own, but they combo so well that it's hard not to run this. Another advantage of this is that your deck does not lose to D-Barrier, because oftentimes, I mean, Kashtira is an Xyz deck traditionally. If your opponent calls D-Barrier, he'll go for Xyz, and then you can just go into your Heatsoul line. So it kind of protects you against one of the most common side deck cards at the moment, and in that sense, it's really, really helpful. Next, we have the rest of the extra deck. We only run one Shangri-La. You only really need one. Because we run the prep, we can always search it off Ogre and special summon this back. But furthermore, if you're summoning a second one, yeah, if you're summoning a second one, then usually it's better to summon another rank 7 instead, or just keep your Kashtira monsters. Because if you get to like turn 3 when you need to summon another one, you can probably OTK, or you can probably wipe their board. Shangri-La is almost never the play going into the second one. Next, we have some pretty standard rank 7s. We have Red Eyes, Flare, Metal Dragon. So if you get your opponent low, then you summon this guy. If you're in time, you summon this guy, because he burns for 500 every time they activate a monster effect. So that's the only purpose of this. I mean, it does have high attack as well to go into Zeus, so it might be one of your targets to go into Zeus with. Next, we have Grobes Aug. I'm probably saying that completely wrong. It's a German advent calendar, Big Eye. If you don't know Big Eye's effect, I've explained it a few times now, because nobody at my locals can read German because I'm in Britain. So basically it just steals an opponent's monster, and this can't attack for the rest of the turn. So if you want a Zeus play, don't go into this. But if your opponent has a really sticky monster, or a monster that has a good point of interaction that they've already used, you can steal it and then make it yours. This is really, really handy. This is probably one of the best rank 7s out there. Just being able to steal an opponent's monster permanently is a massive effect. So Big Eye is one to look out for, or Grobes Aug. Definitely include one of those. One I really like, but have considered cutting, is Harmonizer Gradiel. This is really good against Snake Eyes. So essentially, it gains the attribute of each monster that's equipped to it, and it's unaffected and cannot be destroyed by battle and effects of that attribute. So say against Snake Eye, you have your Rise Heart attached, which is a fire. Suddenly they can barely touch this. And its other effect is you can quick effect target one monster in your opponent's graveyard and attach it, and then detach one material. So you can steal one of their graveyard kind of things, like usually Promethean Princess, put it under there, and all of a sudden it's really hard to get to because they have to kill this, and it's protected by itself. The trouble with this is, most of the time, if I'm getting this out, I'm playing really hard into Nib, so I need to see Cross out, and I also need to not want to go into my Heatsoul line, and I need to be against a graveyard deck like Snake Eyes. So it's very situational, but against Snake Eyes it's really good, so I do think I would keep it in, but this is definitely could be changed for something else if you don't like Harmonizer. Last up for our rank 7s, we have Dark Armed, the Dragon of Annihilation. Again, this is pretty much a staple in Kashtira. You kind of target a card your opponent controls, pop it, and then banish one card from your graveyard. Unfortunately, the downside is this cannot attack, so you cannot go into Zeus afterwards, but the ability to banish stuff from the graveyard enables your Kashtira preparations, and a lot of the time you can also banish a Theosis. There's a lot of fun plays you can do with banishing stuff from the graveyard, and yeah, just that cost, which is meant to be a punishment, becomes an advantage. It's a really good way to pop problem cards. And we kind of have the last cards in the extra deck, the twins. We have Typhon and Sky Thunder. Not much to say with these. We run a lot of XEs, so we've got Sky Thunder, and Typhon is really good at breaking certain boards that spam out a bunch of big monsters with difficult effects. You can just slap this on top of one of your guys. Unfortunately, you can't summon any more afterwards, so make sure you get all your summons in before you get this guy on. Another really funny interaction is the field spell. Field spell with Typhon you've got to be very careful with, because the field spell boosts your monsters by 100 attack and defense for each attribute on the field, and if there's 2 attributes on the field, this suddenly becomes 3100. And his main effect is that monsters over 3000 cannot activate their effects, so he can't activate his own effect. So be careful with that. I caught myself out with that once. Luckily it was during practice. Shout out to Wes for helping me discover that. So be careful of that. That's it for the main deck. Let me show you the side deck. As always, there is a caveat. Make sure you kind of adapt this to your locals, but I will say I have tried to adapt this to the meta as a whole, rather than just what's at my locals, because there is a wide variety of OTSs, because a lot of people come down. So let me show you my side deck and my reasonings behind them. So I suppose the first one isn't too big of a surprise, because I have mentioned it a couple of times so far, but we have 3 Triple Tactics Thrust. You could probably cut this down to 2. I don't think I have found myself signing into 3 very often, but I'll usually replace my crossouts with these if I'm going second, and I'll probably put in 2 plus a couple of the cards that I side in for Thrust. We have the usual targets. We have kind of 1 evenly. The reason we don't run 3 is Thrust. 1 Harpy's Feather Duster. Nice ulti there, by the way. I pulled that the week before the OTS. We also run a Dark Hole. This is not the most standard one, but if your opponent Ibly locks you, that is the best way out of it. And I also find if you get like Effect Veiled on your Unicorn and you have other Kashtira monsters in hand, you can clear it out with Dark Hole. Thrust into Dark Hole, clear their board and yours, and then suddenly you can combo off again. Because, yeah, the worst thing about getting one of your Kashtiras negated is it just sits there and does nothing. We do have 3 more targets for Thrust. I do really like Thrust. I think it's one of my favorite cards of all time. We do have 1 for Tenpai. Threatening Roar. Honestly, there's probably better cards, but it's too funny. I would probably put in another one of the card that's coming up next, which is D-Barrier. D-Barrier does wonders against Tenpai as well, but I like to have the variants. D-Barrier is useful in a lot of different matchups, especially because with Unicorn you can see into the extra deck, so you know exactly what they've got and what options they have, whereas Threatening Roar is only useful against Tenpai. So if I was to change the list, and I probably will before Nationals, it'll probably be a second D-Barrier. And lastly, we have a Raigeki. People question the Raigeki because you have evenly matched and also Dark Hole, but the reason Raigeki is in here, because if I'm searching it off Thrust, I usually need to bait out a piece of negation or interaction, which usually requires special summoning a Kashtira monster, which means your field isn't empty, so evenly matched is suddenly not very good anymore. So that's the reason Raigeki's in here, and I missed it a lot when I wasn't running it, so I would say Dark Hole is optional, but Raigeki I do really think you should include in a Kashtira list. moving on to the last 6 cards of the side deck, we have 3 Lava Golems. Amazing for going second and clearing out some really sticky boards that your Kashtira monsters can't. If there's unaffected monsters, anything like that, Lava Golem is your friend. A funny interaction is the burn effect in the standby phase of your opponent is an activated effect, which means when this activates in the standby phase, you can chain all your kind of Kashtira monsters, your Unicorn, your Fenrir, your Ogre. You can chain all of that straight away. You might not want to, but it gives you the option to do those things before your opponent even commits to anything. And lastly, I think this is a must-have in most side decks at the moment, is Cosmic Cyclone. It's too good against so many different decks. Voiceless, Snake Eyes, and other rogue stuff as well. It works really well against all of it. And yeah, it's hard not to run 3 of these. These are must include in this format, I think. So that's it for the deck list. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Before I had SP, I tried a going second Kashtira, and it really wasn't it. I filmed it and I looked at the deck list and I went, what the hell was I thinking / smoking when I made that? But this list is really solid. The crossout really helps me, and I think you should give it a go. If you like Kashtira, you'll love this deck, honestly. It's really, really fun. Anyway, that being said, let me roll on to the outro. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments, is there anything you would change about this deck? I'm always looking for cards that might work and ways to experiment with the list. That being said, if you made it this far in the video, please do feel free to hit subscribe. New Yu-Gi-Oh videos each week, and as always, happy dueling.